You're going to find out some of the very latest studies on myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome. As always, I always review everything and include it in the webinar so that everybody can benefit. I read the journals for you, and then I give you the information, the key information contained in them, so you don't have to, so you can focus on your patients. And that's what I try to do to help everyone and give you the latest what do they say, what do these studies, what do these published studies show, etc. I've been dealing with chronic fatigue syndrome patients and ME/CSF patients for a long time. Let me put it that way, since the late 80s. So that tells you, 40 years or so. Oh, not quite, 35 or so. Anyway, it's a very exciting topic because initially it was thought to be by the Epstein-Barr virus. Everyone thought, oh, this is what makes this people fatigued. And it started on a village, Incline Village in Lake Tahoe. And people were getting very fatigued. They thought they had the virus, Epstein-Barr. They blamed it on that virus. CDC got involved because so many people were involved in a relatively small town. And they came out with criteria, and it was first called chronic fatigue and immune dysfunction syndrome. Notice it called it immune dysfunction. So I think that when you see what I'm going to present to you here, and these are from studies recently completed, very good studies out of excellent journals. And as you know, I'm the editor-in-chief for several medical journals. And as a result, I think that you need to learn about these latest studies. Anyway, let's get going here. First, this is what I do. Here's the medical journals I'm editor-in-chief of. Microbes, microbiology research, advances in mind-body medicine, alternative therapies in health and medicine. By the way, the top two journals are about 35 years old now. They've been around for quite some time. I'm a reviewer for the Journal of Immunology Research, the Journal of Pharmaceutical Research International, where it's not a big pharma, believe it or not. It's trying to get more natural things into a pharmaceutical grade. Anyway, and then here's my thing. I do this I don't sell anything like all these places. Oh, you need to buy these supplements. No, thank you. No, I do this not for profit. I think that disclaimer here, not intended to teach, to make anyone an expert in anything, just to teach and share the information with you. So the key to solving medical problems caused by toxins: detect the cause, remove the cause, repair the damage. That's it. Once you've done that, you're fine. The big medical secret. Here you go, folks. This is huge. The right diagnosis with the right treatment, the patient gets well. The wrong diagnosis or the wrong treatment, and what happens is the patient stays sick. And I get emails and talk to patients from all over the planet who've been taking all kinds of supplements and binders and all kinds of things, they're still sick. It's very sad, in my opinion. And so I was medical director for the Center for Chronic Fatigue and Immune Dysfunction. 97% of the patients that I saw, I eventually found another underlying, not underlining, but underlying cause. In the subsequent years, studies show that there are other causes for profound fatigue, molecular and cellular. What can cause both? Let's take a look. Let's dive in. So the mitochondria, this is the cell's powerhouse. Mitochondria, any kind of dysfunction of a mitochondria can lead to several diseases, okay? And mycotoxins, by the way, induce oxidative stress, even when these levels are very low. And that's one of the major causes of mitochondrial dysfunction. For example, T2 toxin and vomitoxin in the blood cause mitochondrial dysfunction. That's important for someone, a clinician seeing a patient, to know, a healthcare professional. So mycotoxin-mediated mitochondrial dysfunction is related to several chronic diseases. How does that work? Okay, that works by mitochondrial, it's characterized by a reduction in high energy molecules, mainly, and if you remember from biochemistry in high school, no, not in high school, in medical school, I would say, it's ATP, adenosine triphosphate. I remember that clearly from my biochem teacher in med school. So here we go. These are mitochondrial dysfunction and mycotoxins. That's the title. This is the first slide. There's a series of 5 I'm going to give you the information. The characteristic feature of aging and essential for all chronic diseases, such as ME, CSF, cardiovascular diseases like atherosclerosis, heart and vascular conditions, diabetes and metabolic syndrome, autoimmune diseases, multiple sclerosis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, neurobehavioral and psychiatric diseases like autism, bipolar disorders, etc. What else? Gastrointestinal disorders, including SIBO, irritable bowel syndrome, etc. Neurodegenerative disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Lou Gehrig's disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Huntington's, etc. Then musculoskeletal diseases, fibromyalgia, joint aches and pains, cancers, chronic infections in people. Okay, so as the consequence of the electric transport process, I know this is molecular level, it is the production of ROS as a byproduct of oxidative phosphorylation. So mitochondria are the main source of reactive oxygen species, ROS. And these damage cellular lipids, proteins, and DNA. Remember, you mess with DNA, you may develop cancer. And we'll get into that in a little bit later. So gliotoxin, vomitoxin, T2 toxin, ochratoxin all increase reactive oxygen species, leading to this mitochondrial dysfunction. So, and research findings strongly indicate that mitochondrial dysfunction due to mycotoxins is directly related to excessive fatigue, loss of overall energy, and the ability to achieve even simple tasks without feeling of exertion and exhaustion. So here's the last one on this group of mitochondrial dysfunction. So it has a multi-organ effect. It affects its nervous disorders, cardiovascular alterations, hemostatic derangements, skin toxicity, decreased reproduction ability. Remember, we did a webinar I gave on hormones, how it affects hormones, thyroid hormones causing Hashimoto's. In men, it reduces testosterone to very low levels. And in women, it alters the progesterone and estrogen levels. And then there's bone marrow damage. And then people say, you know, I have really high levels of monocytes or whatever. Well, bone marrow damage, inflammation of the lungs, and degenerative changes in the central and peripheral nervous systems. In other words, in your brain and throughout the rest of your body. So dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system and mycotoxins. So ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, various types of hypersensitivities. These are your hypersensitive patients who can't tolerate anything, such as allergies, food intolerance, sensitivity to chemicals at concentrations tolerable by most of the population, and also EMF sensitivities. This very interesting article from Dr. Tamara Tuminen, a good friend, she's a very lovely lady, and really great study. So this includes POTS, POTS, etc. So let's look at the role of chronic fungal exposure in the genesis, in other words, how it produces intractable fatigue. Patients who present with severe intractable fatigue, with profound physical and or cognitive disability, okay, that's what you're looking at. And many of these patients are giving non-specific diagnosis of ME/CSF according to the whole bunch of different selection criteria. Okay, depends on what website you look at. And it's important to note that inflammation caused by chronic exposure to molds and mycotoxins play a major role in illness, even after the exposure is terminated, meaning just because they left the house or wherever the mold was, they don't get better. Okay, so that's a big point. And by the way, these are two of the studies. I want you to now, we're going to shift a little bit into autoimmunity with ME/CSF and mycotoxins. So here's Dr. Tuminen again, the roles of autoimmunity and biotoxicosis. And here's Dr. Zielinski with fatigue, sleep, and autoimmune and related disorders. Both from great journals. Okay, this is what they said. There are over 100 autoimmune disorders. We know that. As a matter of fact, there's more people in the United States with autoimmune disorders than there are with heart disease and cancer combined. The primary concern is fatigue. 98% of patients who have an autoimmune disorder report profound fatigue. It's debilitating, and it prevents them from completing simple everyday tasks. And this fatigue can cause dramatic impairment in mood, of course, and it diminishes the social aspects of life. It leads to the inability to perform routine daily activities, and it limits physical activity and work. You can't go out, you're too tired. You can't meet friends, you're too tired. Everything relates to this. And remember, this is about autoimmunity, chronic fatigue syndrome, and myalgic encephalomyelitis from mycotoxins. So autoimmune diseases are associated with enhanced pro-inflammatory immune signals in the brain and peripheral nervous system. We've discussed this in some of my other webinars. Cognitive fatigue involves declining alertness, orientation, and mental performance, because it's not only your body that's tired, your brain is tired, and it gets foggy, and you can't remember things. This mitochondrial dysregulation has also been observed in autoimmune diseases. So we know that autoimmune diseases have mitochondrial dysregulation. And what causes mitochondrial dysregulation? Mycotoxins. So we're getting at the bottom, at the cause, as I said in the beginning. So this is an article I published a few years ago, how autoimmunity and the gut. And I've shown this slide before in other webinars. This is a combination of two different autoimmune disorders, rheumatoid arthritis and psoriasis. Look at his finger. Ring finger has the swelling of rheumatoid arthritis, and look at his skin. Here's, you can see the finger again, and you can see his chest and abdomen. And this is treatment for mold and mycotoxins 2 months after treatment. You can see he's improving. And here he is, 6 months. He's a happy camper. So let me show you a lady. This lady, the mother of a well-known doctor. And if you go to medical conferences, he's frequently a speaker. He's great doctor. This is his mom. Sent me this picture. Can you help her? You bet. Of course. And so can you. So she was treated. She had molds and mycotoxins in her home. Here's her leg on the left side before. 6 months later, here's her leg. Look at it. It's fine. Hey, I put this young girl, okay? So on the left side, this is a few weeks after she was treated for Lyme, because, you know, that's a common misconception. Oh, you have Lyme. Look at this test. I'm going to treat you for Lyme. Excuse me, but did you know that to have Lyme disease, your criteria is 3 things. 1, a very high fever, 101. I don't mean 99 or 97.8 or something, 101. 2, migrating joint aches and pains that it makes it difficult for you to walk from the bed to the bathroom. 3, the typical target lesion that's found in 80% of people who are bitten by the right tick. Remember, there's over 300,000 types of ticks. That's not all of them that cause Lyme. There's only one. So look at the picture on the right. You see the difference in people once she got treated. And here's another picture of her SIBO. You remember we mentioned SIBO earlier, a few slides ago. And this is before she started treatment on the left. And then 3 months later, you can see her abdomen is pretty flat. She wrote all this, by the way. She took the pictures. So here's a key concept that I want you to remember. Symptoms of autoimmune disease are often disregarded by conventional physicians, and they relate it to depressive mood disorders, or they call the patient a hypochondriac. This leaves a huge number of chronically ill people that do not receive the healing that they so desperately need. Please remember this key concept. So where do mycotoxins affect you? First, it's the brain. As overwhelming medical and scientific evidence show that it's the brain and nervous tissues. So mycotoxins get in the brain. It's the first place they go to, and they destroy brain cells by what? What were we talking about? Dysregulating mitochondria and causing cell death, apoptosis. And they destroy the blood-brain barrier. Well, so this is from Dr. Amon's group. Dr. Amon is an eminent physician, psychiatrist, an old friend. We knew each other when neither of us had white hair, a single white hair. And he does SPECT scans, single photon emission computerized tomography, which is, in my opinion, much more, gives you much more information than MRIs or neuroquant or any of those tests. So here, left, healthy brain scan. Look at the one on the right. And this is a 3D image. That's the great part about SPECT scans of the brain under Dr. Amen. And by the way, Canada adopted Dr. Amen's SPECT scanning diagnostic methods into their healthcare system. So here you go. Look at the toxic brain and the healthy brain. It's obvious for you which one is which. So here's Dr. Tamara Tuominen again. And she's published this in a medical journal, Journal of Otolaryngology and Neurotology Research. She says chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, various types of hypersensitivities, such as allergies, food intolerance, sensitivity to chemicals at concentrations tolerable by most of the population, sensitivity to electromagnetic fields, and even to daylight, the sun, may associate with mycotoxins. So, and in some of the symptoms experienced by patients, so this describes your hypersensitive patients that all these internet gurus who've never really taught anything at any medical school are talking about. They call themselves experts, but they're not really. Some of the symptoms experienced by patients with advanced mold-related illness. What are these symptoms? Fatigue, memory and cognitive impairment, and somnolence are like those reported by silicone breast implant patients. So now we've brought in implants into the picture because they can do the same thing. Why? Because inside the implants, it's been shown and demonstrated, and there's many studies that molds grow inside the implant from the and they get into the implant during the manufacturing process. Okay. So I want to offer you this tool for a screening tool. It's a bunch of pages, it's about 14 pages long, but here's the key. You give this to the patient to fill out. They put their name and date at the top. And on the left, how bad is it? And you see, what is the number one symptom? Fatigue, usually made worse by physical exercise. And when did you first notice the symptom? And it goes through all these symptoms. This helps you in identifying which patient is being affected by molds and mycotoxins. Here's page 2, some more. Okay, so again, they fill it out. They're telling you this is the subjective part. The rest of the patient questionnaire is divided into 4 different sections. Okay, one is a review of systems, which they do because the questions are all there already for them. Yes, no. And other potential exposures from either home or work, occupational history, because that's important in some cases, and a nutritional questionnaire. This is where you find out if they smoke, what they drink, how often, 6-pack of Coke every day, or maybe beer. But anyway, this is where you find that kind of essential information. And so I'm offering you this questionnaire if you'd like it. What is the most precise and accurate test for mycotoxins? It's the antibody test, 97%. Both IgG and IgE measurement of 12 different mycotoxins. So you get 24 test results. IgG is the toxic reaction. IgE is the reaction that's a mast cell activator and can lead in some people to mast cell activation syndrome. What about treatment? First and foremost, the first rule of toxicology. Get the patient away from the toxin or the toxin away from the patient. That's the first rule of toxicology. So if they're still in a moldy house, moldy workplace, moldy anything, if their car is moldy and they ride in it, well, what's going to happen is they're not going to get well. It doesn't matter how astute a doctor you are, they are not going to get well. No amount of treatment will help. So that's the first thing you have to do. Then you give them itraconazole, and I get people, oh my God, that's going to kill them. It's going to destroy their liver and all this. Well, yeah, that's if you read from Dr. Google. But if you read medical journals with scientific and medical evidence, this is what they say. And here's one publication. And this publication is 6 years old. So itraconazole, known as Sporanox, is a common antifungal agent that was developed in the 1980s. It's been in clinical use 35 years, well, now 41, with an established safety record. So much so that they use it now in cancer. Look at the left picture is a basal cell cancer, and here after 59 days of treatment with itraconazole. See that? Look at this other one. Huge cancer growing on the forehead of the patient, this bottom left. And after 59 days of itraconazole, if it can kill cancer cells, it's going to help you also with your mold and mycotoxins. And don't use binders. They don't work. Okay. So they did this study and they looked at all the different kinds of binders, kaolites, clays, activated charcoal, zeolite, bentonite, blah, blah, blah. They neutralize only one mycotoxin, and it's a very rare mycotoxin in indoor environments. It's aflatoxin. Rarely ever found, and I have the studies that show that. They're ineffective in all other mycotoxins. Not only that, but they also bind vital vitamins as well as macro and micro elements. And yes, you can say, well, I tell them to take it separate from meals. I tell them to wait till I don't know how many hours have passed, all that. That's not how your gut works. So, and remember, I wrote that article on autoimmunity in the gut. What are the tests that there's no medical evidence saying that these tests are useful? Urine testing for mycotoxins, the OAT test in urine for mold, the genetic test, which is a sham test, as is the visual contrast. Why get an MSH, C3A, C4A? There's no evidence they have anything, any link to molds or mycotoxins, just so you know. And remember, there's low levels of mycotoxins in many, many foods. And they're all below TDI, tolerable daily intake. That's set by all the agencies, FDA in the United States, European Food and Safety Authority, and in the European Union, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit. And that's what you pee it out, and it can be found in urine of healthy people. So here's a study by Dr. Fry and his group, published 2 years ago, this right now, that showed that 4 mycotoxins were found in both pasteurized and unpasteurized milk from cows. 91% of all the milk tested had at least one mycotoxin, and 30% of the milk had 2 to 4 mycotoxins. However, all the mycotoxin levels were well below TDI and easily excreted in urine, as are most of the mycotoxins found in beverages and foods. You don't get sick from them. So here's an email that I got. I've seen over 5 naturopathic doctors. They'd prescribed herbs, binders, and cholestyramine. These things just made me feel even worse. Do you know anyone that can help me? Well, all of you listening, I hope. And now, if you want studies or do you have any questions for me, You can also put them in the chat, and I'm about to answer them. Write me, immunedoctor@gmail.com. Next Wednesday, it's tea time. Every other week, Wednesday is tea time, and every other Wednesday is a webinar. So in tea time, this is where anyone can join and ask me questions about Lyme, co-infections, heavy metals, breast implants, molds, mycotoxins, treatment, diagnostic methods, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're welcome to join and ask questions. Okay, so whoops. So I'm going to leave it here. And now I'm going to answer a few questions that have come up. One lovely lady wrote, I'm 80 years old now and have had chronic fatigue for 35 years. I am finally symptom-free. I know who you are, but I won't mention you. I'm so happy that you are well now. Thank God. And here's someone who's an Incline Village survivor. Yeah, I remember Dr. Holmes from the CDC, and he gave the criteria in 1988. Okay, and more messages, more chats, I should say. Do mycotoxins stay behind in a home after mold is remediated? It depends on the remediation company. Can furniture within a toxic mold-infested home off-gas mycotoxins? No, they don't off-gas mycotoxins. The mycotoxins are on the furniture. They don't get off-gassed. Off-gassed is for things such as volatile organic compounds. So they have to be a gas. The mycotoxins are not gases. Mycotoxins from previously removed mold after the home has been remediated and the mold is no longer present. Well, if you really trust the person that's remediating, yeah, you could say that it's now gone. But remember, furniture, clothes, pillows, curtains, towels, bed sheets, pillowcases, etc. There's those that are affected as well. And here's another question from previous lecture. You stated there's two possibilities for elevated antibodies: acute environmental exposure or active colonization. No, not acute. You misunderstood. I say current exposure in not the environment. It's not outdoors. These are from indoor air. And or colonization, and there's two places for colonization. One is the lungs, and two is the nasal sinuses. And the question is, if itraconazole works by killing mold spores in your body that produce mycotoxin, is it only effective against colonization scenario? No, no. That's not what the medical literature says, and it's not what I say. How do you differentiate between colonization and acute environmental exposure? Well, it's not acute, it's current exposure. And second, it takes a doctor examining. First, a doctor has to do a history, a medical history of the usual things that most doctors do. They first get, what are you here for? Second, they do a medical history. Third, they examine you. That's where you get it. Does everyone get colonized? No. If not, why only some people? Well, think about it. Some people live in a place where there's a lot of mold. Some people live in a place that they only visit every so often that has some mold, like a gym. So not everybody's exposed the same amount for the same amount of time at the same time of day, and they all weigh the same weight, and they all are of the same height. We're all individuals. So what is your favorite mitochondrial support to improve dysregulation? Can we use terbinafine if itraconazole is not covered? No, it will not. Terbinafine will not work against your molds such as Stachybotrys, such as Aspergillus, Penicillium, et cetera, et cetera. And you don't support the mitochondria. What you do is you support, well, in a way, you do support the mitochondria, and that's what the supplements patients take that I recommend. And these are all in my webinar that I did on treatment, because that's what you're doing. You're helping support the system while you're killing off the mold spores and the mycotoxins. What do you think of DNS or Gupta's treatment? The best opinion I can give you is that show me that that's been published and it works. Show me a medical journal that says this system, we did this and this, it's peer reviewed. If you just put it on the internet, it's just an opinion. Is there more than just the antifungal needed for MEC? In 97% of the cases, that's all you need. And what can one do to stop all the sensitivities? Well, I think the sensitivities stop when you slow down the mitochondrial dysfunction by killing off the mold spores, and they then don't make mycotoxins. And again, that's been shown pretty well. Dr. Paul Cheney, I remember Paul very well. He moved to North Carolina after being in Incline Village, as you know, you probably know. Always knew it couldn't be EBV. I can't agree with you more. The Tahoe flu moved through Incline Village with a 4 to 7 days incubation after exposure. Okay. If the IgG test is red, medium to high in most mycotoxins areas, even years after remediation, does that mean significant exposure? Yes. Are the antibodies from silicone left behind in the body after explantation cause? Yes. The reasons for CFS was associated with EBV, and that Dr. Cheney used the new EBV serology test to show that EBV was being reactivated. The other part also about reactivation is that there's cross-reactivity with mycotoxins. So if you've got elevated mycotoxins by cross-reactivity, your Epstein-Barr virus, your CMV virus, your HHSV6 virus, they're all going to turn on, but you don't actually have it. That's just the cross-reactivity. And I've discussed that in many previous webinars. Colonization is not present. What is the mechanism by which itraconazole removes mycotoxins? Well, if you're being exposed to mold spores by breathing them in, remember, your hair is 100 microns thick. Mold spores are 2 to 4 microns thick. Mycotoxins is 0.1 microns, the same size of a virus, okay? You don't remove mycotoxins, you remove the source of mycotoxins. And the studies have shown, both in colonization and current exposure, in hundreds and hundreds of studies, that the treatment is itraconazole. All right. Why would you need itraconazole if you leave the exposure? How can you remove mycotoxins? Aren't they a gas? Mycotoxins are not a gas, they're a toxin. Okay. And I just, maybe you didn't see this slide, but I showed you, oops. That even leaving the house doesn't help. Look at it is important to note that inflammation caused by chronic exposure to molds and mycotoxins play a major role in illness, even after exposure is terminated. Okay. So you saw, here's another comment. I was reading about these people in Boston in the 60s that got sick from toxic buildings. Yes, it was called sick building syndrome. Okay. So anyway, I'm trying to come over here to the chat box. They saw their viral levels go high. They said people were tired of having multiple symptoms. I think this illness is so old. We have overlooked it for 100 years. And no, sir, it's in chapter 14 of Leviticus in the Old Testament. Okay. It used to be called St. Anthony's fire during the Middle Ages, because people during the plague, there was not enough food to go around because many of the farmers died. Okay. And when you die, there's no one to till your fields. So they would eat moldy bread. And they developed a lot of different symptoms. Also, lately, there's been some talk in not medicine, but in various other circles that the Salem witch thing was due to women being affected by mycotoxins. Some people get sick with and some don't. Seems so very much exposed. Comment. Everyone's immune system is unique and different. Some get sick quickly, and some take a long time to get well. And just as a common example, 2 people catch the seasonal flu that comes around every year in October. One stays in bed for a week, can't do anything. The other one uses a box of Kleenex for a couple of days and then goes back to work and they're fine. Everybody is different. You can't put everybody in the same mold. And that's not a, I shouldn't say in the same mold, but in the same boat, maybe that would be a better. Can you carry mycotoxins without also being colonized with mold? Yes. If you're breathing mold spores in every day, you're breathing in, they along with them are the mycotoxins. You don't have to be colonized, you just have to be around it, breathing it. Is Sporanox brand name more effective than generic itraconazole, or they give you the same results? Here's what I tell everyone. In general, not in general, mostly generics are made in India. And as a doctor, every so often in the medical news, there's a medication that is struck, that comes from India that's generic, that's disallowed because they found something in the generic. And so the same goes for Sporanox and itraconazole. Mainly what I have seen in my patients, about 16,000 patients or so, is that if some patient starts taking itraconazole and they kind of report back to me that they're feeling queasy or not so good, I tell them to switch to Sporanox, and that usually makes everything okay again. Remember that generics are great because they're cheaper, but if you want to go buy a generic, just be aware of the consequences. Yeah, there's a discussion going on about the issues about the Boston housing thing. Opinions on compounded itraconazole produced in the U.S. I really don't have an opinion about that, as long as it's as pure as it can be. Can you send the citations regarding the increase of EBV titers that are really due to mycotoxins? Just go into PubMed and type in cross-reactivity to mycotoxins, and you get a whole bunch. And then you can pick the ones you want. Actually, it doesn't say just EBV. It says, like for instance, they're related to the type of testing. So it's an antibody test, and they'll say viral antibodies. And some, and others, they'll say viral antibodies such as, and they'll relate, HHSV6, EBV, CMV, et cetera. Okay. Well, Miss Laura, thank you for your kind words. If a person wants to start itraconazole 100 milligrams QID 4 times a day, will you get any benefit at this dose? I go by medical and scientific evidence. If somebody shows me an article that 4 times a day is better than twice a day, that it's been shown in medical and science and it's evidence, fine. But up to now, there's none of that. Okay, can I explain how to interpret that? I did a interpretation of testing, I think about a month or 2 ago at the very most. I would encourage you to go to my YouTube channel and watch that because it goes through the whole thing. And here's another one. I've not met one person who got well with the Shoemaker protocol. Has anyone got well? I get 5 to 10 emails a day, and sometimes I include 1 or 2 like I did today, but I get 5 to 10 emails 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and tell me I've been on Shoemaker Nathan protocol for 2 years, 6 months, or 5 years, or God knows how much time, and doesn't work. There's more comments about the Boston and Incline Village. Yeah, when I was trying to decide if I wanted to take itraconazole, I asked Dr. Campbell repeatedly what were the side effects. Finally, he told me the side effects of taking itraconazole is good health. And she wholeheartedly agrees. Thank you, Adam, for your kind words. If a person had history of traumatic brain injury 20 years ago from a motor vehicle accident, would a SPECT scan still be able to show current mold damage from mycotoxins despite previous damage from MVA? That's a question. That's a great question. And I would say yes, because how the SPECT scan sees, or actually the scan is for a toxic brain is different than a TBI brain. Shout out to Vincent Marinkovich, who was saving people with mold illness in the 1990s using Sporanox. I wholeheartedly agree with you. He was a great doctor. He wrote a chapter in a medical textbook in which I wrote a chapter too. He was a great guy, and unfortunately he passed away way too soon. But yes, he was a great doctor, and he knew, he understood it. He understood it clearly. Do you provide an appointment with people who do the MyMycoLab serum test to go over their studies? Yes. Stanford really owes Dr. Mold Vincent Marinkovich an apology. They owe him much more than just an apology. Thank you for helping with my daughter. She's doing really good after your recommendations. Thank you, Maria. I appreciate those kind words. Any other questions in the chat I can answer for you? And if we don't have any, then we'll call it the end of this webinar. And next week, join me for tea time with Dr. Campbell. Ask me more questions and I'll answer them as best I can. And also, remember that 2 weeks from today is another webinar. Okay, folks, take care, stay cool.